Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. May Brahman protect us both, the teacher and the disciple. May he nourish us both. May we both work together with great energy. May our studies be vigorous and fruitful. May we not hate or criticize each other. Om. Peace, peace, peace. We are continuing the study of the third chapter of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Last time we did the Sutra 7, which said that the practices of Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi, the last three in the eightfold limbs, are external or are more internal to the previous five. Because the real practice of mind control starts with these three, with Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi. So they are called internal practices. But compared to the higher state of Samadhi, the Nirbija Samadhi, the seedless Samadhi, even these three states are considered external. So in this Sutra 8, Patanjali says, Tadapi Bahiranga Nirbijasya. But even they are external to the seedless Samadhi. We have seen earlier that Samadhi is of two types, Samprajñana Samadhi and Asamprajñana Samadhi. All the states of the Samprajñana Samadhi that we dealt, that is Savitarka, Samadhi with question, Nirvitarka, Samadhi without question, Savichara, Samadhi with discrimination, Nirvichara, Samadhi without discrimination, Sananda, the blissful Samadhi, and Asmita, Samadhi when mind is only aware of the ego. All these are within the realm of Prakriti. The idea I, the I sense is there. As we say, I meditate. So they are all within the realm of Prakriti. They are all lower Samadhi. Swami Vivekananda says, that is to say, in this first state of Samadhi, compared to that seedless state, therefore, even these are external. We have not reached the real Samadhi, the highest, but the lower state in which this universe still exists as it were, and in which are all these powers. In the seedless state, which is the highest Samadhi, there is no I consciousness. We become one with pure consciousness. It is pure awareness. The mind is completely free from any thought waves. The real nature of the self is not perceived as long as there is a single wave in the lake of the chitta, the mind stuff, says Swami Vivekananda. Just as one small patch of cloud can cover the sun, a single wave, thought wave in the mind can cover the self. When the mind is made completely free from any thought wave and the self is realized, that purified mind has gone beyond the realm of Prakriti. Since Dharana, Dhyana, and the lower Samadhi are all functions of the subtle body within the Prakriti, they are termed as external to the seedless Samadhi. In this Nirbija Samadhi or seedless Samadhi, the last veil which prevents self-realization is removed. The light of the self, which up to this stage illuminated other objects, is now turned on itself. So Sri Ramakrishna speaks about this. He says, in the Nirvikalpa Samadhi, which is same as, it's another name for the Nirbija Samadhi, the mind completely takes the form of reality. The distinction between the meditator and the object of meditation does not exist. Sri Ramakrishna is speaking from his experience. He had experienced Nirvikalpa Samadhi so many, it's a common experience for him. The 3 steps of the lower Samadhi are mere preparation for this highest Samadhi, Nirbija Samadhi. It's like preparing for sleep. We cannot achieve sleep by any personal effort. If you try to go to sleep, you'll become all the more awake. So all you can do is make the preparatory arrangements. Turn the light off, get into the bed, pull up the sheets. That's all you can do. Sleep has to happen. Similarly, this seedless Samadhi has to happen, and it happens when the lower Samadhi, the former one that we dealt earlier, the lower Samadhi ceases. Now, after dealing with these 3 stages of concentration, namely Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi, Patanjali now deals with the 3 fundamental types of mental transformations when one practices higher yoga. In the next 3 sutras, 9 to 12, he deals with that. In the process of self-realization, the mind passes from one stage to the next through these 3 transformations. The ordinary transformations of the mind are according to our reasoning or according to stimuli that comes from the external world. But these 3 transformations, however, are of a special kind, and they happen only after the yogi has attained the state of Samadhi. So in the Sutra number 9, he speaks about the first one. It's called Nirodha Paranama. Vyudhana Nirodha Samskarayor Abhibhava Pradurbhavo Nirodha Kshana Chittanyayo Nirodha Paranamaha. By the suppression of the disturbed impressions of the mind and by the rise of the impressions of the control, the mind which persists in that moment of control is said to attain controlling modifications. So this sutra deals with the transformations when all the disturbances of the mind are suppressed. Mental modification, chitta vrittis, are suppressed. You remove the disturbing thought wave by bringing in another thought wave. You cannot, we are dealing with mind, you have to remember. We cannot just physically take something out from the mind, no. How do you remove one thought from the mind? By bringing in an opposite thought. So to remove the disturbing thought, we bring in another thought, opposing thought wave. Usually our mind is disturbed by negative thoughts of anger, hatred, jealousy, sorrow. And to remove them, we bring in higher, holy, elevating thoughts, positive thoughts of love, compassion, cheerfulness, joy, etc. Now, the mind has got a very peculiar characteristic. The mind takes the form of whatever we put in the mind. We know liquid takes the form of the container in which it is kept, and liquid keeps the level. Whereas gas fills the container and takes the shape of the container. Even if it's a small amount of vapor or gas, it fills the container. You keep a burn an incense in a corner of a room, or keep a bottle of perfume in a corner, it fills the whole room, and it takes the shape of the room. The mind thought you keep in the mind That also fills the mind. But instead of the thought taking the shape of the mind takes the form of the thought. That's the difference. So when we bring in positive thought and controls the negative, disturbing negative thought, the mind takes the form of that controlling positive thought. And this is called Nirodha Paranama, controlling modification. Swami Vivekananda says, explaining this sutra, he says, that is to say, in this first state of Samadhi, the modifications of the mind have been controlled, but not perfectly, because if they were, there would be no modifications. If there is a modification which impels the mind to rush out to the senses, and the yogi tries to control it, that very control itself will be a modification. One wave will be checked by another wave. So it will not be real Samadhi in which all the waves subside, as control itself will be a wave. Yet this lower Samadhi is very much nearer to the higher Samadhi than when the mind comes bubbling out. That is, even though there is another wave, the mind is still holding a wave, but it is better than uncontrolled mind going everywhere. To attain real state of Samadhi or yoga, all the modifications must be eliminated. That's why in the first sutra, Patanjali said, Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. All the Chitta Vrittis, modifications of the mind stuff, should be controlled. That's yoga. Whereas here, it's a controlling modification is still there. So for higher Samadhi, this controlling modification also must go to reach the highest Samadhi. The disturbing thought has to go, the controlling thought also has to go. Sri Ramakrishna gives a very common example, which we have in the village they used to have. Suppose thorn got stuck in your foot. Then what do? You get another thorn and take it out. Using the second thorn, you take the first thorn which got stuck in your foot, take it out. But you don't keep the second thorn, you throw both out. That's use is finished, you throw them out. The thoughts are like that. You bring in positive thought to control the negative thought. So the negative thoughts are suppressed. But you don't, to reach the high state of Samadhi, you have to remove both. When the positive thoughts have to be discarded. And between these two impressions, the disturbing thought is suppressed and the controlling thought is coming. There's this very tiny gap when the mind is free from all impressions. The aim of this modification of Nirodha Paranama is to produce this momentary gap consciously and then gradually extend it so that the mind remains in that modified state for quite some time. We want the mind to be without any impressions. So this, we are slowly trying. When I say the yogi, this is all advanced stage, is slowly trying to increase that gap when there is no impressions at all. And now we come to the next sutra 10. Tasya prashanta vahida samskarat. Its flow becomes steady by habit. The effort to suppress the impressions, the disturbing impressions which are of the impressions or the seeds of the lower Samadhi produces momentary vacuum. But the tendency of the seed to come back into the field of consciousness is very strong. So it's a constant struggle to suppress it. However, by repetition of effort, the suppression becomes easier. It becomes easy. It will be easy. Mind becomes more easily able. We are able to bring the mind into the unmodified state and keep it in that state for a longer time. Swamiji says, the flow of this continuous control of the mind becomes steady when practiced day after day, and the mind attains the faculty of constant concentration. It takes time. Day after day, you have to practice. Through long and constant practices, even apparently impossible things become easy. There is a story about a young man carrying a fully grown bull, so heavy. So people are surprised at his feat. How can you do that? Well, when the calf was born, he was a child. So in his enthusiasm, the newborn calf, he took it on his shoulder and carried it. And that he continued day after day. As the calf grew into a bull, the boy also grew into a young man, but he continued to that. It becomes easy for him. It is not a difficult thing. Even so, that's why we say through practice, even apparently impossible things becomes possible. So what about the control of the mind? It becomes possible. But in the beginning, it's a continuous, constant struggle because the mind resists our effort of control. We have given it full freedom all this time, and now suddenly we are trying to control it, so it resists. Through constant, continuous practice, when the flow of awareness becomes natural and smooth, then there are no more obstacles, no more struggle. And the resistance of the mind is due to our latent impressions, samskaras. And if the person has developed dispassion or detachment to a sufficiently great degree, then the struggle becomes less. So dispassion is necessary along with practice. That is why we see Patanjali in the first chapter, Sutras 12 and 13, bring these two together. Abhyasa and Vairagya, practice and dispassion. Again, Sri Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 6th chapter, we see Krishna talking about these two again, Abhyasa and Vairagya. Practice and dispassion, they go together because practice becomes fruitful or easier and to reap the result when there is dispassion. We can see this in Sri Ramakrishna's life. He was fully established in the solid base of renunciation of lust and gold, even before he began practicing the various spiritual disciplines. And because he never deviated from that ground of dispassion, he could very easily concentrate his mind and master in a very short time whatever the particular discipline he was practicing and reach the result. And he was so established in renunciation that his body, physical body, rebelled if unconsciously he went against this high ideal. Just to mention one example, Sri Ramakrishna has the habit of chewing some spices after his meal. Spices, a few pieces of cardamom, cloves, and cinnamon all mixed together. Just a few he put in the mouth and chew. Now one day he found he didn't have any. What they had kept is ran out. So he went to Holy Mother in the Nahabat. Those who have been to Calcutta knows it's so close, just across his room. And she gave him a few pieces to eat, and then a few more pieces she wrapped in a paper and gave it to take to the room. He was taking that in his hand, and instead of going to the room, Sri Ramakrishna was walking towards the Ganga. Ganga was in full tide. And he was repeating to himself, Mother, you want me to fall into the water? You want me to fall into the river? And Holy Mother got so worried. As a young lady behind in the path, that she never went out in front of other people. So somehow she managed to send somebody to call Hriday, Sri Ramakrishna's nephew, who was in the temple at that time. He came running and took Sri Ramakrishna back to his room. All because he had taken something in his hand. It's against his ideal of renunciation. He was so much established in that idea of renunciation. So if we have got so much of detachment, this practice becomes easier. Now we go to the next sutra, which speaks about the second transformation. First one was transformation of control. Now we come to the transformation of Samadhi, Samadhi Paranama. Sutra 11. Sarvarthade ekagritayoho chayodayo chittasya samadhi parinamaha. Taking in all sorts of objects and concentrating upon one object, these two powers being destroyed and manifested respectively, the chitta gets the modification called Samadhi. This second transformation is Samadhi Parinama, or some modification called Samadhi, begins with the practice of dharana and continues till the Ekagrita Parinama, which given in the next sutra, is attained. It continues. Here, various objects are taken. The ordinary mind is full of various objects. One by one, they are taken and replaced, one after another, by one particular chosen object. That's what we do in dharana. Dharana is the effort to control the mind and focus on one particular object, chosen object. So all the other objects except that particular one are considered as distractions and eliminated completely in dhyana when the mind flows towards that one particular object continuously. Now the consciousness moves further in depth, and all the non-essentials, even name and form are considered non-essentials, are removed from the object of concentration. The object shines in the mind in its real nature, in naked reality. And Patanjali dealt this in Sutra 43 of the first chapter when he described Nirvitarka Samadhi. And when we reach that stage, the mind is said to have the transformation called Samadhi or Samadhi Parinama. And we have to remember that when we say the mind is transforming, it does not mean that it becomes something else. Only what is not the mind is removed. All the thoughts, ideas, which are unwanted, foreign, they are removed from the mind. The mind becomes completely pure. That's transformation. In the first ordinary mind, we see many things called multiple perception. We are seeing so many things. The mind is very distracted at that time, moving from one object to another, among all the different objects that is in the mind. The mind is scattered, restless, and distracted. When they are removed one by one, and only one thought remains, then the mind becomes one-pointed. And when the mind becomes one-pointed, the struggle is less. When both this multiple perception and one-pointedness are removed, That is the state of the seedless samadhi or nirbija samadhi or nirvikalpa samadhi. As I said earlier, the mind takes the form or characteristics of the content. Whatever we put in the mind takes that characteristic of the form. And if there is nothing in the mind, if there is no ideas, no thought, no image, then that thoughtless, imageless mind cannot be defined. We cannot say anything about that. Swami Vivekananda, in his poem, The Hymn of Samadhi, he writes, slowly, slowly, the shadow multitude entered the primal womb and flowed ceaseless. The only current, the I am, I am. Lo, it stopped. Even that current flows no more. Void merged into void, beyond speech and mind. Whose heart understands, he verily does. That state cannot be described. That is why the Upanishad says, Yado vacho nivartande aprapya manasasaha, that from which the mind and the speech comes back, unable to grasp. We cannot understand, which cannot be described. Sri Ramakrishna tried many times to describe the high state of samadhi to his disciples. He could not. When Sri Ramakrishna was asked to fix when he was doing the Advaita sadhana under the guidance of Totapuri, the teacher, asked him to fix his mind on that absolute Brahman, formless, attributeless Brahman. It was easy for him to bring the mind from multiple perception from all the external objects. You see, very easily he could concentrate the mind, and his mind was absorbed, filled with the form of the Divine Mother of the universe. So it has become one-pointed. But my Divine Mother's form was there. He tried again and again, but that form filled his whole consciousness, field of consciousness. But Totapuri, his guru, knew that Sri Ramakrishna was a fit aspirant and he could attain that high state. So he said, no, you concentrate between the eyebrows. And he looked around and found a piece of broken glass, took it and just pointed between his eyebrows. No, concentrate here. And later Sri Ramakrishna described to his disciples what happened then. He says, he concentrated his mind again, and again the Divine Mother's form, the blissful form of the Divine Mother came. So then he says, then I took the sword of discrimination and cut the form into two. The one-pointedness also is gone and the mind got lost. He went into Nirvikalpa Samadhi. There's no more, no form, no name, nothing. And one example he says, the salt doll becomes one with the ocean. And the pure mind and the pure self are one, says Sri Ramakrishna. There is no more difference. The mind becomes one with, there is no mind there, it only self is there, which cannot be described. And that's what Patanjali is saying in the next sutra, Sutra 12. Shanto didau tulya pratyau chitte sekagrita parinamaha. So this is the third transformation. First we dealt with the Nirodha Paranama, that is controlling modification. Second was Samadhi Paranama, the transformation called Samadhi. Now third one is Ekagrita Parinama, that is one-pointed transformation. The one-pointedness of the chitta is when the impression that is present and that which is past and that which is present are similar. When the impression that is past and that which is present are similar. This transformation happens when the mind enters the transcendental realm. It's going beyond one-pointedness. The same impressions, pratyaya, rises in the field of consciousness again and again. And it appears as though only a single fixed impression is there, because the same thing is happening again and again. It doesn't look like many, only as though it's only one impression. And time seems to have stopped. Now, what is time? Time means movement. Movement of one incident, another incident. We measure time as the gap between two incidents. That is time. If there are no two incidents, there is no movement of time. The time comes to a stop, standstill. Cinematography can be used as an example for this. When we project different dissimilar images on the screen at intervals of less than 1/10 of a second, we get the illusion of a continuous moving picture. Now, if all the images on the film roll are exactly similar, then the result will be one stationary, unchanging picture, because the images are falling one after another, and only one image, the same image is falling, or the similar image is falling, and falling quickly. It appears as one picture. We see continuous picture because they are dissimilar. If they are the same, then there is no, we don't see the same picture falling again and again. It appears as though one single stationary picture. We can see the same picture falling again and again only if we run the film on slow motion. Then we can see, oh, the same picture is falling again and again. Otherwise, it looks as one stationary picture. That's why this Nirodha Paranama is like that. One image is again and again coming in the field of consciousness. There's nothing else. Commenting on that, Swamiji says, how are we to know that the mind becomes concentrated? Because the idea of time vanishes. The more time passes unnoticed, the more concentrated we are. In common life, we see that when we are interested in a book, we do not note the time at all. That's our common experience. Anything interesting, time so quickly. If it is not interesting, even 5 minutes looks like as though it's a half an hour. To continue with Swamiji, in common life, we see that when we are interested in a book, we do not note the time at all. And when we leave the book, we are often surprised to find how many hours have passed. All time will have the tendency to come and stand in one present. So the definition is given: when the past and present come and stand in one, the mind is said to be concentrated. So these are the three transformations of the mind that Patanjali says. To go through them once more. The first one is Nirodha Paranama, where the disturbing impressions are suppressed, not completely removed by the impressions of control. Impressions of control have just come into our mind. So they just suppressing the disturbing impressions. That is Nirodha Paranama. The second stage is Samadhi Paranama, where These disturbing impressions are completely suppressed, and the impressions of control are now prominent. They are holding the whole field of consciousness. In the third stage, Ekagrita Paranama, there is no question of suppression at all. Only similar impressions follow each other, one after another, as though in a stream. Now we come to the next sutra, Sutra 13. Edena bhutendriyeshu dharma lakshana avastha parinama vyakhyataha. By this is explained the threefold transformations of form, time, and state in fine or gross matter and in the organs. These transformations of form, time, and state we experience in our day-to-day life situations. For example, at present, we are talking about Raja Yoga, the mind control. So the mind is filled with thoughts of Raja Yoga, and the mind takes that form. You have to always remember, mind takes the form of the thoughts that we have there. So in our present, the mind is taking the form of Raja Yoga. Then, soon after that, it's lunchtime, the mind takes the form of that. Oh, then afterwards, we have to go for shopping or do some gardening. Another thought comes, one thought wave after another comes, and the mind takes that form for the time being. And then the next, it goes on. So that is mind taking the form. But it does not hold anything permanently. It keeps on changing. It passes from one form to another. Again, the mind passes through past, present, and future. That is transformation regarding time, lakshana. When the impressions of control or the re-emergence of these distractions becomes strong or weak, we have the transformation regarding the state or avastha. Sometimes the impressions of control are strong. Sometimes the disturbing impressions come back strongly. It changes. So that is the transformation regarding avastha. Like the mind, the matter, both gross and fine, and the sense organs are also subject to these three types of transformation. First, we look at the form, transformation of form. Takes a gold ornament, for example, a gold necklace. We melt it and change it and reshape it as a bangle or a ring. So the form has changed, but the substance remains the same. Substance is the same. The gold is still the same. Only form has changed. That is transformation regarding form. Again, time. When the ornament is made, it's present. After some time, it gets older. It changes in time. And when it's in the beginning, it is shining. As time passes by, it becomes duller or worn out. That is change regarding state or condition. So all these three happens in matter, both gross and fine, and also in the sense organs. But the mind in that state of samadhi is beyond these kinds of changes. Mind's real nature is not changed. Transformations are only in the apparent nature of the mind. Transformation of the mind means the thought waves are suppressed, removed, But the mind as it is, in its pure state, nothing happens. When we say purifying the mind, what do you mean? All the unwanted things, what is not the mind is removed. That's all. The mind remains the same. When we purify water, we don't bring in something new. Whatever is not pure water is removed. The pure mind remains the same. All the unwanted things, impressions, thoughts, which cloud the mind, they are all removed. And removing all these unwanted things from the mind is by not identifying with them, by detaching from. That's the only way. There's no other way to remove all these things. By the moment you identify with them, you're holding them, they become stronger. You don't identify with them, detach from the thoughts, then the thoughts becomes weaker and we are able to control and remove them gradually. The mind gets all the materials for thinking from the external world, from the elements in the external world, through the senses. The transformations in the mind produce corresponding transformation in the elements and the sense organs. What do you mean by elements? Elements are the air, water, earth, fire, and space. What we call tanmatras. A transformation, when the modification happen in the mind, similar modifications happen in the elements and also the sense organs. When the yogi has got mastery of the technique of transformation, that is the three transformation we mentioned, the Nirodha, Samadhi, and Ekagrata Parinamas, it helps the yogi to control the working of the mind. Control of the transformations helps the yogi to control the working of the mind. Similarly, control of the mastery of technique, or the control or mastery of the technique of transformation in the elements and senses, enables the yogi to control and manipulate natural phenomena. And that is what we usually say as the psychic powers or siddhis, which will be dealt later in this chapter. Swami Vivekananda says, the concentrations taught in the preceding aphorisms were to give the yogi a voluntary control over the transformations of his mind, which alone will enable him to make the samyama named in the Sutra 4 of this chapter, the third chapter. Now we come to the next Sutra, 14. Shandodita vyapadesya dharmanupati dharmaha. Shandodita vyapadesya dharmanupati dharma. That which is acted upon by the transformations, either past, present, or yet to be manifested, is the qualified. Sutra 14. Swami, explaining this, Swamiji says, that is to say, the qualified is a substance which is being acted upon by time and by the samskaras, and getting changed and being manifested always. That which is acted upon is a substance which is being acted upon by time and samskaras. Just take the example of a human being, say an adult. He or she have passed through the stage of childhood, that's past. At present, he or she is a youth or an adult. The old age is yet to come, that's future. But through all these changes, the person remains the same. It's the same person who has gone through childhood, youth, and old age. There's no difference. And that person is the dharmi, the qualified in this example. So qualified is that which is acted upon by transformation. The next sutra. Kramanyayatvam parinamanyate hetuhu. The succession of changes is the cause of manifold evolution. The mind, our mind continuously changes from the crude state with many negative, unnecessary thoughts and images. It evolves to less crude by removing those negative thoughts gradually. And gradually we evolve. And as we evolve, we enjoy greater happiness and contentment, more peace, and we come closer and closer to our real nature. We can say that everything in this universe is made up of the three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas, in varying combination. Or some people, some things, they may be more of sattva and less of rajas and tamas. Some will have more of rajas and less sattva and tamas. Some may have more of tamas, less sattva and rajas. So everything in this prakriti, in the universe, nature, is made up of these three gunas. And the attributes of the object change according to the action of the gunas. When the gunas vary, when the gunas act, and the samskaras or inherent tendencies act, the attributes of the objects also change. So any object can change from one form to another. Therefore, an illumined person does not differentiate between a piece of gold and a lump of clay, because that person knows that they are all made up of the same three gunas in different combination, that's all. They are all made of nothing but the three gunas. He is completely unattached towards the objects of the world, and he looks upon them all equally. When Sri Ramakrishna was practicing spiritual disciplines, one of the practices he did was this: taking a lump of clay in one hand and holding a coin in the other, he sat on the bank of the Ganges and repeatedly said again and to himself, rupee is clay, clay is rupee, to impress the idea deep within that both are made up of the gunas, nothing else. They are similar. Apparently, we give value to this. Of course, to live in the relative world, we are distinguished. But we have to remember, we are talking about this from the high stage of yoga. There, the enlightened yogi sees there's no difference, both as equal. He does not distinguish between piece of gold and lump of clay, because for him, both are equal, same. The properties in the nature exist for the purpose of our evolution. And we have to go through a sequence of practice, step by step. Just as we said earlier, in the 8 steps of yoga, we cannot just, people want to go straight away to the stage of samadhi instead of practicing all the earlier steps. You ask any person who is new to the practice of yoga, want to go straight to pranayama and then samadhi, dhyana. All the early steps, they are unnecessary. You can't do that. You won't be able to, you cannot skip and jump straight to the top. You have to go through sequence of practice, because only that way we evolve. This succession of practice is for our evolution. All things evolve naturally, eventually, over a long period of time to higher stages. But we can speed up that evolution by our personal effort. In the long, even if you don't do any practice, maybe after thousands of lives, we may evolve to a higher stage. But we can reach the highest stage in this life itself if we put in our personal effort to improve, to evolve. So we are the controllers of our own destiny. We are the makers of our own destiny. We can decide what destiny we want to do, reach. So Patanjali says that these succession of practices are for our evolution. Thank you.
So there's some time for questions and answers, everybody.
Mataji Pranam, quick question with the succession which we were talking about. So when you say about the succession, is it the first asanas which needs to be mastered before pranayama or dhyana, or is it doing or is it the abhyasa or the practice which you do at the same time, which is the asana, pranayama and dhyana together?
The practice has to be done, but we have to remember, as we try to practice asana and pranayama, we have to concentrate on the earlier two aspects of yama and niyama. That is the giving the moral foundation. Without a strong moral foundation, you cannot build the edifice of yoga. First, we have to be fully established in this practice of yama and niyama. That is ahimsa, this non-violence, truthfulness, non-injury, continence, non-receiving gifts, and all these practices we have to be. That's for our that's moral practices. We have to have, along with the practice of asana and pranayama, we have to do that. And then we can try to control the breath and control the mind. Control of breath helps in controlling the mind, because mind, we know that when you are disturbed, take a few deep breaths, the mind calms down. So pranayama is mainly, especially in the Vedantic tradition, we practice pranayama just for calming down the mind. We don't spend too much time on pranayama, but we try to spend more time on concentration, concentrating the mind on one chosen object. As we try to concentrate, slowly, the distracting thoughts becomes less. So all this practice has to be gone through. Simply wishing to reach the stage of dhyana or samadhi, it won't happen. That's what when you say the succession is for evolution.
Okay.
I'm just wondering, with Patanjali talking about the suppressing the distracting thoughts, is it more that you are ignoring them? Like suppression, you worry that there's going to be a reaction when you suppress something. And I'm wondering whether we should think of it more as you try to ignore these distracting thoughts that come up when you're trying to focus the mind.
Yes, that's what we keep saying about being detached. Suppression, it will come back. The English translation is given as suppression, but it's more being detached from that particular thought. Then slowly, we are not giving more fuel to the thought, and it becomes weaker and weaker and slowly die out. But if you try to ignore, consciously say, I want to get rid of this thought, I want to get rid of thoughts. That means you are again thinking about the thought and becomes stronger and stronger and become deep rooted. As in the Friday discussion, we spoke about that neuroplasticity. The path become deeper and wider, and the impressions become stronger. So the only way is detachment, dispassion. That's why so much importance is given to dispassion, vairagya, dispassion and detachment. Ignore the thoughts. That means you are detached from the thought.
Basically, we're saying to not to suppress the thought, but trying to detach or trying to address it with something else, and trying to make a relationship with something with positive by addressing that negative thought.
And also the negative thought, what we can do is, there's two ways. Sublimation, turn it towards the higher thing. Say, if you're believing in God, well, it's God has got some purpose why this has happened to me. You can think like that. Or you can just reason, using reasoning, that was something happened which in the past, it's finished. I've turned the page. I'm now going forward. I'm not going to get stuck in the past. You reason yourself. That way also you can go forward and remove that negative thought.
Yep. Thanks, Mataji.
I've got a fairly big question here about the whole idea of pursuing Raja Yoga. Now, these are these teachings, until comparatively recently, were not available to the wider community. They were the preserve of the yogis mainly, or those students living in ashramas, and under close supervision, they were delving into these things and practicing them. So for the people nowadays who are delving into Raja Yoga, the general spiritually minded population, so to say, would they have to then have to accept the fact that they can only go so far with this while they're living out in the world, and that really to become very advanced in Raja Yoga, you would need to be actually in some sort of ashrama under supervision, or otherwise it's even potentially dangerous.
Yes, it is.
But where does that leave us then if we're studying this?
No.
What's it?
We study this as a path. This is some, just as Swamiji says of the four paths, we have path of knowledge, path of devotion, path of action, and path of concentration. So we get the technical knowledge, the information, and we use the part of concentration in our practice. Because Vedanta speaks about concentration. Concentration of mind, meditation is very important. And for that, this part of yoga helps that. Other than that, when we live in this world, we cannot be practicing it fully. For that practice, we have to be strictly under the guidance of a teacher. When Swami Vivekananda was giving the talks on Raja Yoga in San Francisco, he gives a lot of lectures on pranayama and meditation. But he again and again wants, don't do these practices just by listening to me. If you are serious in practicing, come to the his residence where he was saying he was in a flat. He said, come to the flat when we will have. A few students who are serious enough went to him and he taught them how to do it, how to practice. So this pranayama and higher practices of pranayama and dhyana has to be practiced under the strict guidance of a teacher, constant supervision. They had to be under strict control about what you eat, what you do. You cannot do anything 10 or 15 hours a day and then go and do this practice. No, you can't. And you have to be under strict control what you eat, how much you sleep, what sort of recreation you do. Everything has to be under control. So it's very difficult for modern people. It's very interesting to read and study. We think that we'll reach, but in practical life, it is, if you try to do it without the guidance and living an uncontrolled life, it will be dangerous. The person can have nervous breakdown, go mad.
Well, is a more realistic, is there potential, like Sri Ramakrishna used to always say, it's very good for a householder to go into seclusion, so to say, for some time, or to have a retreat, in other words. So, all right, if you do that, then temporarily you could be going deeper into these practices. It's going to give you, for some time, a much calmer, raised level of consciousness even. But then unavoidably, when you then go back to your family and home and your workaday life, you're not going to be able to maintain that very calm, serene state of mind that you might have reached during the retreat. But does that really matter? I mean, it's better than nothing, isn't it?
Yes,
you can't be expected to maintain that, to keep yourself up on that high level.
You are not able to keep it, but when you try again, you'll be able to reach a certain amount of calmness early. When you sit for your meditation, at other times, after your daily work, you sit for meditation or try to concentrate, you'll be able to do it a little more easier than previously. That's it. Because what you are doing, achieving there in the calm atmosphere of a retreat, there's no external distractions, comparatively less of work problem or other distractions less. So the mind is able to concentrate more. And once you go forward little, it won't be completely lost. So it will, some of these distractions come back. Still, the mind is a little more concentrated than previously.
Mataji,
Yes.
there is a question here. Can you hear?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Please.
I wanted to ask you, when you are concentrating and meditating, after your breath becomes steady and calm down, do you listen to the voices coming from inside or just concentrate on the breathing and concentrate on the mind?
We are tasked to concentrate on the either breathing, or if you are concentrating on a form, you concentrate on the form, not
But
on the.
When you are doing these chakras, then you are going from the, say, Visuddha and other chakras,
Yes.
heart chakras. That time, once you are calmed down, you can hear some of the voices coming from inside. So do you concentrate on that or not? That is my question.
Yes, because you can concentrate on that.
Yeah.
That is typically yogic practice.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
They say the yogis hear the anahata dhvani coming from within, and also they also say that is the, of course in English they say the music of the spheres.
Yeah.
And recently we saw a short video where the NASA has recorded the vibrations of this sunlight, and the sound, when they transformed into sound waves, it came as Om.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the deep sounds of the universe.
Yes.
Where in this in today's world do we practice? Where are those ashrams which you recommend, Mataji, for having a strict supervision of doing this, all these yogic practices? It's easy to find yoga studio and people asking you to do different breath work. You can go to YouTube, Google, because these days internet is the best doctor, or the doctor which people believe than the actual doctor.
Yes, but internet won't be the real guru,
Real
real
guru.
yogi. No. I don't know whether the good yogis, whether you can practice here, here in Australia, I have no idea. But for us, we are practicing, we are following Vedanta. We can use the practice of meditation and concentration from the Raja Yoga part and can use it for our meditation and concentration in our way of meditation. In India, there could be yogis who are real yogis.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And what are those ashrams in India you would say, or you have experience with, or you have seen?
I'm sorry, I don't know about the ashram, any ashram where you can
No, I'm
really
just
learn yoga. I don't know.
Okay.
Because our ashrams, we are following the Vedantic teachings. No. So it's not completely yogic practices.
And I was also wondering, when a guru or a swami goes into samadhi, what would happen, or how would the other people who are around that person able to recognize that the person is into samadhi? Or how does that person, how, say for example, if I find some yogis into samadhi, how do I see that the person is in samadhi? Except that that person, he himself, or that person is into samadhi, won't be getting disturbed. But how do I come to know that the person is in samadhi as an outsider?
Well, outsiders, unless you are yourself a little advanced, you won't recognize, you won't understand.
Okay.
Sri Ramakrishna, in the case of Sri Ramakrishna, we have seen in his life and the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, where his teachings are recorded. It's a first-hand experience of the recorder. He was there in many, almost every weekend he was there with Sri Ramakrishna, and he's seen Sri Ramakrishna going into samadhi quite often. And the many newcomers don't know that he has gone into samadhi, and they think, oh, he has fallen asleep. Sometimes people, even advanced spiritual aspirants, they have read about samadhi, but they didn't recognize. And these people, the devotees who are regular visitors, tell them, sir, this is samadhi. And there's one incident where we can see in the gospel, an Advaitic Vedantic sadhu had come to Sri Ramakrishna. He was speaking, and suddenly Sri Ramakrishna was talking to him about Brahman and everything, and he goes into samadhi. He's with a beautiful smile. He sits there quietly without moving. There's no motion. The whole body is completely standstill. Even breath stops. And then the sadhu the monk was surprised. What is this state? And then one of the devotees sitting there said, sir, this is samadhi. And the sadhu had read about samadhi, but he had never witnessed it.
Wasn't there a case, Gayatriprana, was a Dr. Sarkar who was in the
Yes.
room, and he wanted to test Sri Ramakrishna, and he even touched the eye to see if there was any response.
There was no response.
So in other words, one of the signs is they are totally unaware of their body. They're completely temperate for the moment, transcended the body.
Because the mind is, there's no mind at that stage. When in that state of samadhi, the mind has completely dissolved or got merged in that higher self. And so the body doesn't respond at all. Dr. Sarkar tested the breath. There's no breath, no pulse. Then as a last resort, he put his finger into the eye. No. There's no response at all.
And then I don't know whether it's Samadhi, but I remember two of the disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, I think it's them, isn't it, who reported they saw a yogi being taken away by a tiger.
Yeah.
The yogi was chanting Om. The tiger had taken the yogi in its mouth, and the yogi
It's still
continued to
standing
chant
or chanting Om.
meaning oblivious even to that terrifying situation. I mean, this is an eyewitness account.
Yes, that's
not
true.
that long ago, 100 years ago, maybe, or more.
See, they completely overcome the sense of the body. Body consciousness is no longer there.
Mataji, if the body consciousness is completely gone, what brings the person back into the body?
For the time being, body consciousness is gone, but they have got some work to be performed. They have got some mission to be to accomplish. So they consciously bring the mind back to the body. Like Sri Ramakrishna's case, we can see he in the Samadhi, as he comes down from the Samadhi, he will say, oh, I'll have a glass of water, I'll eat some sweet, or I'll smoke. There's some desire he brings in consciously to bring the mind to the body consciousness. Then the devotees know that, oh, he's slowly coming down from the high state of Samadhi. Because he has got a mission to achieve. Ordinary people, once they reach the Samadhi, Sri Ramakrishna says the highest Samadhi, body won't last so long. Because just with the momentum, a few days it will go. And as Sri Ramakrishna says, with 21 days, the body falls off. If you reach that high state of Samadhi.
Is it basically saying when we say the conqueror of death, where you actually voluntarily and happily conquering the death in a way?
Yes, death does not mean anything to them. Death
Yes,
is only
exactly.
for the body, because they have got they are established in the consciousness that they are that infinite self. So death doesn't mean anything. Death is only the body.
And I don't know if this is true. I was just watching some documentaries with regards to Dr. Joe Dispenza. He's one of the neuroscientists, and he was trying to get some calculation or measure of someone saying Samadhi, what happens scientifically. So what he has come across recently, he's about to publish the paper and make it more official. But the research paper says, when because he's been to India, or he met these different places where he had this observation of yogis taking into Samadhi or going into Samadhi, based on whatever people said or different yogis said. So what they say is they were able to measure the electromagnetic field of a person than a normal person, the electromagnetic field of, because everyone has that field as a human. But when someone reaching into Samadhi has got about 3 to 4 meters, in the range of 3 to 4 meters of electromagnetic field around them. And then to what you're saying, there are no pulse, there's no heart pulse or anything as such. Yes. So yeah, and that's one of the something which I've just happened to know from watching this documentaries. So they were saying, oh, this would be made official because that is being peer reviewed as any other research paper. So yeah.
See, that is quite natural. It's quite can be happen, because we say a person, a really holy person had wherever that person has lived, we can see a palpable vibration, spiritual vibration. With the room where Sri Ramakrishna lived for 30 years. Now, how many more than 100 years, 120 years that she has gone away from there. Still, if you go now, still you can feel that. The same with the case of Ramana Maharshi, the hall where he sat quietly without much conversation. He just sat there most of the time. And people sat there. Even now they say, if you go there, you can palpably feel the spiritual presence. because that
Yeah.
and that spiritual aura emanates from them.
Yeah, the vibration, or sometimes people feel the goosebumps, is what he was saying, which was very curious of him, because he was very questioning all this samadhi and all these practices. He's aware of how meditation helps, but he really wanted to have that logical reasoning. So yeah, what you're saying is right.
So thank you, everybody, for joining a particularly interesting talk and question and answer session today. And we'll look forward to the next Raja Yoga talk next month, the monthly talk. Coming up, we've got the fortnightly spiritual evening discussion coming up this Friday night, the 27th. We're continuing the theme of the science of happiness, drawing on the lectures and book by Pravrajika Gayatriprana. That's very interesting. You're most welcome to join that from 7:30 to 8:45 p.m. Next Sunday, we will be celebrating the Sri Krishna's birthday. We'll have chanting by the Sarada Math nuns. They'll be chanting chapter 12 of the Bhagavad Gita and reading the English meaning. That's the yoga of devotion. And then there'll be talks by Dr. Ashit Maitra and Pravrajika Gayatriprana. So that will be from 11 a.m. next Sunday. To our members of the Vedanta Society, a reminder, we've got our AGM next Sunday from 2 p.m. Unavoidably, that will be via Zoom. And we trust, especially all of you in the lockdown areas, where we're coming to you now, we're under the strictest lockdown. We are all going along with that, enduring that. I say to people, it's like one day blurring into another. There doesn't seem to be so much difference between one day and another at the moment. Maybe that's a very Vedantic concept being imposed on us. But hang in there, everybody. A few more weeks and surely we'll be past the worst of this and things will start to ease off and open up again. So please stay well. And we look forward to having you join us for our future events. And we'll particularly look forward to being able to stage events again back in our wonderful Vedanta hall. And furthermore, talking about Raja Yoga and retreats and so on, we've got a retreat center in the Southern Highlands in Robertson. And we are really looking forward to getting back down there and starting to have some regular retreats on the subject of getting away from the world for some time and focusing on spiritual life. That's a very valuable facility we have. So that's it for this morning. Thank you.